Alright guys, Wes here, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Kratos' next big adventure with God of War 6, the highly anticipated next installment in the God of War franchise. Now, if you played God of War Ragnarok, then you know that that game has left us a ton of unanswered questions for the overarching story, like who is the one who blew the horn? Do Tyr's poses actually tease something for the next game? What is the significance of the mask in the rift, and where exactly did Atreus head off to? There is still so much that we don't know, which I guess is kind of exciting, but it also makes the anticipation for the next game even more brutal, which I guess since this is God of War, I guess that makes sense. Now, God of War Ragnarok is also said to be the end of the Norse timeline, so unless the reports of an Atreus half sequel are real, the next God of War game we will be playing as Kratos will be God of War 6, which is set to be another soft reboot of the franchise like God of War 2018. Will God of War 6 move to an open world gameplay format? What mythology is Kratos going to next? Was this really our last time in the Norse timeline? And when will God of War 6 release? These are the mysteries that we will attempt to uncover, so check the video chapters for easy viewing, and without further delay, let's get into it. So even though God of War Ragnarok was the last mainline game set in the Norse timeline, there are still a number of loose ends in the story. For example, Sindri is still very mad at Atreus for certain reasons. We also have no idea the significance of the mask in the rift. What greater knowledge was Odin seeking out? That's something that we still don't know, and I would personally love to have those answers. There's also the other semi-loose end of Kratos flat out telling Freya that he has a lot more work to do, which this line of dialogue was likely there to tell players that there is still a lot more work to do in the Nine Realms. However, this is kind of a fitting move because Kratos has moved on from his Destroyer days and is more or less on his Builder story arc. With the new game supposedly leaving the Norse timeline behind, it's safe to assume that most of the characters will also be left behind since their roots are in the Norse timeline, but some have suggested and theorized that God of War 6 is actually going to bring some of the Norse characters back and have them jump into the new world alongside Kratos, which would be pretty wild. Whether it's friendly characters like Freya now, or ones that are upset like Sindri, who seems to be on a warpath, which if my theory is correct, he could be the one to cause the events that lead Kratos into another pantheon. It's hard saying. I would personally love to have some of the characters return, but I know some that are completely against that. And speaking of the new world, it's widely believed that God of War 6 is going to begin a new story in the Egyptian mythology. Cory Barlog has been pretty open about the fact that God of War 2018 was almost set in the Egyptian mythology, and the studio has even published some of the concept art from this vision, but obviously they ended up going the Norse route, and to great critical acclaim. Now, in the soft reboot series, 3 universes are teased, seemingly based on the myths of the ancient Egyptians, Aztecs, and Japanese. I've even seen some theories about Celtic pantheon being a possibility, especially with Mimir's origin as Puck, which these are convincing, and there's also references to Tyr's poses to Hinduism. So I guess any of these routes are possible for God of War 6, but since Sony already has another action series set in Japan, and the fact that we know Santa Monica Studios already has some ideas for an Egyptian God of War game, I think that's our most likely destination for where Kratos goes next. But as I said, it's impossible to know for sure. Now, aside from the story and the setting of God of War 6, the next big question mark surrounding the game is the gameplay style. The God of War franchise started as a frantic hack and slash with insane set pieces and huge hordes of enemies, but the Norse timeline kind of slowed things down, making the combat feel heavier and more high stakes, while also